Good morning and welcome to BBOC Live. It's 10:30 a.m. Eastern, and this is the college basketball Saturday betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as they will do each and every Saturday morning, are my BBOC fellow co-hosts Mike Calabrese, Mike Randall, and Greg Waddell. We have a lot to get to today. We will give two best bets. We'll also throw in a little four-team Moneyline, round robin, or underdog Moneyline parlay, however you want to approach it. We'll also talk a couple of marquee games. But before we get started, I do want to remind everyone to make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets there in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. And also a word from our sponsor, BetMGM. BBOC is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $158 in bonus bets when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Calabrese, before we get started here, I'm sure you're glad to be on air where you can't be getting attacked by any St. Bonaventure fans.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that every fan base is just laying in wait, waiting for you to pick against their team, particularly when they're on national TV. I took my lumps last night. I'm ready to give out some fresh new picks because giving up 90 plus to the Bonnies is like giving up 130 to anybody else this year.
Yeah, one of the best parts about college sports is just like the little pockets of rabid fan bases, and then when all it takes is just one person in their army to retweet like your bad bet or take, and then you'll get all of those fans coming out of the woodwork. But let's get started here and move on to our first best bets. It's good to be back talking college basketball. I'll kick things off. I'm going to go with LSU against Alabama here. I just think this is too many points for the Heisman Trophy winner. Oh wait, I have to transition to basketball here. But I do think this is too many points here for LSU, who has a higher ceiling now that Cook is back. But this Alabama team coming off a huge win over Auburn, they still have major defensive issues. They just have a couple guys on the floor that are always defensive liabilities that I think LSU can take advantage of. LSU's offense is actually pretty efficient if they don't turn the ball over, and Alabama doesn't really turn you over. LSU can defend at the rim, and they're going up against one of the premier rim defense offenses in the country. They do give up a ton of threes. Alabama's obviously going to shoot a ton of threes here. LSU does at least have length to bother Alabama on the perimeter. So it's always dangerous betting against Alabama at home because there's going to be just a ton of three-point variance. So if they go nuclear from three, it's probably lights out. But I think this is a good spot for LSU. Bit too many points, and I think they match up well. Bama's not going to turn them over. They can defend at the rim, and they have length on the perimeter. So give me the Tigers here. Let's throw it to Randall. What do you got for your first best bet of the show this season?
Yeah, I co-sign on that one. Stuck, you and I are aligned with these teams that rely on three-pointers on offense and then can struggle defensively. I think it's a great call. We're going to Miami, which right now I think is 3.5, maybe 4 against Pittsburgh. Despite all the injuries and all the issues, Miami 11-7-1, that's 61% against the spread this year. Pittsburgh is 4-1 against the spread on the road, which is why people may be backing him today. But let's break that down a little bit here. They play West Virginia, no creasa, no battle. They shot 16-38, that's 42% from three-point range. Syracuse, they end up giving up 81 away. They didn't cover. They play Duke, no Roach, no Mitchell. So that one's skewed. And they shot 50% from three-point range. Okay. And then they ended up finally moving forward with Pittsburgh and going to Georgia Tech, winning a game that was close. Miami is finally healthy, guys. No O'Meara in the last game against Syracuse. No Poplar on the road at Wake Forest. They still took them to overtime here. They dominated Notre Dame. I know it's Notre Dame, but they're finally together. We love regression. Jim Larinaga, great coach. Miami brings a lot of players back. Miami makes their free throws. Pittsburgh, the absolute worst within the ACC at making free throws. Miami's back again. Here they are. Tell a friend. The Hurricanes today, too good, too well coached. They're going to get on a roll, and it starts today against the Panthers.
Well, my weekend is obviously centered around my Baltimore Ravens tomorrow in a huge game. First home AFC Championship game to try to go to the Super Bowl. I've been talking about that game all week. Randall, his Super Bowl this week is this game. He's been talking about this game all week. So if I will be rooting for this game, maybe more so than any of my bets. If they don't cover, send some condolences. If you're part of the Pitt Army, don't come at him. He's going to be in a state of depression. But a good case there for the Canes. Greg, your debut on the show, what are you going to lead off with?
Yeah, great to be here. I'm going to stay in the ACC and follow Randall's lead here. But first off, just as a sign of solidarity, let me throw the Canes up for Mike there. So, Stuck, you know this last week. It was all on me. It wasn't on you. I dared to fade North Carolina, and I got bit for doing it. I'm going to do my best to cater to those North Carolina fans, to apologize to them by fading Duke on this fine Saturday. I got Clemson plus 8.5 last night. The line now is 7.5. I still really like that number. Clemson's been very good on the road this year. They had that game where they led wire to wire against Alabama back in the non-con. Everybody loved this team a month ago. Have they hit a road bump? Yeah, absolutely. They look like a much different caliber version of themselves. Right now, I still think in the long run, this team is one of the top 3 teams, top 3 rosters in the ACC. They just need to start performing. And I love spots like this midway through the season where you have a team you believe in the talent of that's desperate for that marquee resume win. I think this is one of their only opportunities left this season. They have North Carolina still on the schedule down the road as well, but they really not only need to perform and just play in one of these games, they need to win one of these games. Duke has been flirting with disaster lately. Obviously, they had the disaster with Blake Hinson on the scorer's table, but even the game before that was a one-possession game with Georgia Tech with a couple minutes left. And last year, P.J. Hall really got the better of Kyle Filipowski in this matchup. He had 26 points on 16 shots in Clemson's win the last time these two teams played. 7.5 just feels like too many points. I will rock with the Tigers.
Yeah, I was gonna go. I mean, I guess every 3 or 4 days donation, fading UNC. Someone beat me to Florida State because I was gonna have to bet them. So hopefully it doesn't get back up to 7. So if it doesn't, that probably means that they're a lock. But UNC has been a covering machine. But this is a nice gesture of solidarity for the UNC fans. UNC has been on quite a tear, both straight up and against the spread. Let's go to Calabrese. What do you got?
All right, let's go to the River City, Dayton versus Richmond. And I know people are going to be queasy about this one because a ranked team on the road against an unranked opponent have not fared so well this year in terms of, against the spread performance. But I really like the Flyers here. I play it all the way up to -4. And the reason is that Richmond is a one-man show, albeit a really good one-man show. Jordan King in 3 of his last 5 games has popped off 31 against George Mason, 24 against Davidson, 32 against George Washington. But I think Dayton has answers defensively. They're 20th in opponent shooting efficiency allowed. And when you look in terms of the matchups, who they can throw at King in particular, Cheeks is a really impactful on-ball defender. If you look at Evan Maya's website, he leads the Flyers in what's called box DBPR, which is just one way to say that he fills up the stat sheet defensively and can be someone who can check King. Because I don't think unless he scores 25 plus, I don't see the Spiders being able to hang with them for 40 minutes. Because at the end of the day, Dayton still has the best player on the floor, arguably the best mid-major center, big, whatever you want to call him, in the entire country. Darren Holmes II, since December 9th, he's averaging 23.5, 9 boards, and 3.5 stocks per game. He's playing at an All-American level, so I'm going to roll with the Flyers and hope that they can buck the trend of ranked teams going on the road in conference and losing.
Yeah, love watching Holmes, and you're right. They got to stop. Mooney's running some different stuff this year. But you have to stop King, and he's capable of going for 30 plus. He's been on fire of late. But even if he does, you still have Holmes who can match him. So that should be one hell of a battle in the A10. All right, let's take a quick break and talk about our first marquee matchup. And let's go to Hilton Coliseum, talk a little Hilton Magic. Kansas will travel to Iowa State, where last year they got absolutely thumped. For this game, this is I think it's right around, it's priced fairly. I think that I would lean under. The totals come down a little bit. Last year, I think both their games were super low scoring. I'm very curious to see how Kansas approaches this game in the half court, because you basically can't get anything in the post against Iowa State. 0 percentile per synergy as far as frequency of possessions that they allow in the post. You just can't get anything at the rim. So what are they going to do with Dickinson? How are they going to run offense? Very curious to see what Self has here. I do know that Kansas is an elite transition offense. So if Iowa State is missing their shots, they're going to push it. And Iowa State hasn't been hitting their shots. So I'm a bit worried about just some shooting regression for the Clones and them making threes at home. But I think this game sets up for potentially to bet Kansas live. So if Kansas, you have Hilton, there's going to be a ton of energy of Hilton Magic. If Iowa State goes up big, I'm going to look to jump in on Kansas live. I think this will be a game of runs. Iowa State, their offense just goes through these prolonged droughts. And if they're missing shots, that's when Kansas can push, get out in transition. And when they're in transition, they can pretty much score against anyone. So nothing pregame here for me. Randall, what are you seeing?
Yeah, I'm seeing Iowa State here. Bill Self is great in these spots, but historically he's great when he's on the road in conference and he's a favorite. You look at the Bet Lab stats, he's great in those spots. Here he's an underdog. Lost by 15 last year. They got crushed, had a much better team than I think they have this year. Won at home against Iowa State last year, but only by 2. Osselberger's done a good job here. Lost by 17 at Iowa State in 2019, lost by 13 there in 2016, lost by 5 in 2015. This is a tough place to play, which we know that. Hilton Magic. My question is Hunter Dickinson, Stuck. I don't think he's healthy. He's got the knee injury. It's sort of lingering. His rebounds have dropped off. He was great rebounding early in the year. Double-double machine, has not done well lately, sort of leaning out there, trying to hit threes, jump shots, gets into foul trouble. And the problem with Kansas, they don't have a shooting guard here because Nick Timberlake just cannot make shots. He's sometimes playing 2 or 3 minutes per game, which means they're not deep. That's the issue. So they have to go on the road. Dickinson has to play big. They can't get into foul trouble. They're going against a good Iowa State team. I don't like it here. Self is kicking himself, guys. Could have had a guy like a Cam Spencer. That's the type of player he needed instead of Timberlake. They did a good job against Cincinnati, but that was a close game. Lipsey's healthy with Iowa State. I like Iowa State in this matchup. I know it's a spot that we normally back Kansas, but Iowa State 4-2, just a half game back in the Big 12. Hilton Magic at home with a questionable Dickinson who hasn't been great lately. Not a deep Kansas team. I like Iowa State today.
Yeah, there's no bench either, so you have to worry about foul trouble on the road. I will give credit to Self and Kansas. They seem to have given up on Jackson, and then you have Furphy in there is much better, and he's provided some secondary scoring, which has helped. Greg, what are you seeing here?
I'm right there with Randall. Kansas has as many players as we have on this show right now. They have 4 players, right? That's problematic because you have to play 5 players in a college basketball game.
That's true.
And it's difficult. It's difficult to do. Iowa State's undefeated at home. They've been stellar there. All the wins by 4 points or more. They beat Houston, #1 on Ken Pom at home a couple weeks ago. This defense is elite, fellas. 3rd nationally right now, but 1st in turnovers forced. DeJuan Harris is the guy I'm going to keep my eyes on here because he's a guy I really believed in a leap forward for him on a team that you knew was going to need a little bit more of an offensive punch. He just hasn't been capable. I don't think that's who he is. 5 of his last 7 games at this point, he's been in single-digit scoring. But the bigger issue for him, he had 5 turnovers against Cincinnati, 5 turnovers against TCU. Both those games got really dicey down the stretch at home. He can't do that, and Iowa State does exactly that. They're going to force him in some difficult spots. Part of it is that he doesn't have help. There's no secondary ball handling on this team. You mentioned Elmarco Jackson. That's not a guy as a true freshman that you want to see the ball in his hands on the road needing to help alleviate pressure. Just a bad matchup for me. And are we really going to act surprised? I think Mike nailed it with Dickinson a little bit. Are we really surprised that he's plateauing a little bit in conference play? I'm pretty familiar with that through the years. That's a difficult thing for a team to survive. Give me the Cyclones.
Yeah, I would think, Iowa State, they take away anything at the rim, they take away anything at the post, and they really force, a secondary player to beat you. So, I would think that unless Kansas is getting out in transition and Iowa State's just missing a ton of shots, KJ Adams is going to have a big game creating himself. But yeah, the lack of secondary scoring and depth for Kansas is certainly an issue. Calabrese, are you on board?
Yeah, this is an Ames love fest. We mentioned Hilton Magic. They're 10-1 against the spread as a home favorite. Coach Otts is going to find a way to limit Dickinson. And we've been throwing around, their stats. They force turnovers on 23% of opponent possessions. That's 2nd nationally. So they're always putting so much pressure on the ball. And then the third element for me is that I think we're due for a positive shooting regression game from Lipsey. He's been in a bit of a shooting slump, but what he's going to do in this game is get to the foul line. So I like some friendly home court whistles at Hilton, get him to the line, get him feeling good in the first half. And if he can give them 20 plus in this game, I think they're going to cover.
Yeah, that is worth mentioning. Lipsey, dealing with an injury, did play last game. But good stuff there. Should be a fun one to watch in Hilton, as always. All right, let's move on to our Moneyline underdog segment. We'll each give a Moneyline underdog that we think has value or can win outright. I'll kick things off. Let's go way under the radar. I'm going to go with Valpo. Let's go with the Beacons here. I think this is, first of all, this is a good spot. They are catching a Missouri State team off of a huge win, in double overtime over Drake. Quick turnaround. But this Missouri State team, one of the most inexperienced in the country. So they struggled early, as you'd expect, but they're starting to play their best basketball of the season. They are still a horrendous transition defense, but that's something Missouri State doesn't look to do. And when they do, they're, I think, second or third percentile in efficiency. So they're not going to exploit them there. And I think Valpo can actually run their stuff in the half court. So I think that there's some value here with Valpo in a good spot and a decent matchup. Randall, Moneyline Pup, are you bringing to the table?
Great call with Valpo. People don't realize they've been playing much better of late, so that's a great call, Stuck. Folks, I know Boston College, and I know Boston College Notre Dame rivalry. I've lived it here for 30 years. No one knows how big this rivalry is. It's huge. BC swept ND last year. That has never happened since ND has joined the ACC. BC has lost 4 or 5. ND's on a 3-game losing streak, one of which was just a week ago at Boston College, which was very, very close in Connie Morg. Wrong team is favored here. I know my Eagles. ND is number 1 in the ACC, a 2-point interior defense. That's where Boston College needs to score. They are not a great 3-point shooting team. They're top 100 per KenPom at scoring inside the arc. Notre Dame at home, rivalry matchup. I have been there many times. I've been on the good side, the wrong side. BC is not sweeping Notre Dame back-to-back seasons here. ND has the backcourt. They shot well at home. You saw them play very well at home. Get scalding hot, had some nice performances. Notre Dame here, moneyline underdog at home, rivalry against Boston College.
Randall, you want to tell your in 20 seconds or less your sleeping bag story?
100%. Yeah, we were making a run back in '94 against Disco Dan Cross in Florida. Scalding hot. Team was great. We beat North Carolina. We said if they start with a 3-pointer, we're going to take the sleeping bag and go sleep outside because we're going to the Final Four. BC starts with a 3-pointer. We go outside. We got the little grill. We're sitting outside of Connie Forum getting ready. Disco Dan Cross, 3 threes with about 5 minutes left, buries us. Walking back with beer cans being thrown at our head with sleeping bags. Just a wonderful memory stuck up in Chestnut Hill.
Yeah, you got to go back a long way for the memories of BC. Randall was sharing them. Then you had Troy Bell, a little flash with Jared Dudley, but not been many good memories since. But good stuff there. Greg, what do you got for your Moneyline underdog?
So I'm going to go out west, and I've got my eyes on a certain situation that's going on in the Pac-12 right now. I call it the Pac-12 scheduled death trap because I'm told travel restrictions require teams every couple of weeks to play back-to-back away games in the same state lines with less than 48 hours between those games. I mean, you'll see a late Thursday night tip followed by an early Saturday afternoon game. It's a weird spot for any basketball team, but I was curious. So I went back and looked it up. Pac-12 teams this year across the entire conference, 3-17 outright when they're playing the second game of that sequence on the road with 2 days rest or less in between. This is Arizona at Oregon. If you haven't figured out what I'm talking about, Zona has now lost 3 consecutive away games in this conference. This conference is not good, by the way. The analytics tell us that Arizona is one of the best teams in the country. You're not supposed to lose that many in sequence on the road. 2 nights ago was Oregon State, Jordan Pope, the buzzer beater, fantastic March moment before March, but I just have serious concerns with Arizona defensively on the road right now. We see it keep popping up. They gave up 100 to Stanford a couple weeks ago. Then it was Washington State. They just let them grind them to death. Oregon's the best team out of those 3 teams that they've lost to, that they've played. I think this is a very dangerous spot, and Kylan Boswell's the guy I have my eyes on for Arizona. 3 of the last 4 games, he's had 1 field goal from the floor or less. I don't know what happened to him. He was one of the best point guards in the country in the non-con. I can't trust this team on the road. I can't trust the Ducks at home on that crazy-looking court.
Yeah, he scored, I think, 14 total points in his last 4 games, which is over 100 game minutes. 2 donuts, and another game with only 3 points. I'm not sure what's going on there. Arizona also just gives up way too many open jump shots. And you mentioned the quick turnaround. Oregon is not an easy prep, so which makes it tougher, right? They change up all their defenses. They'll go zone, man, they'll press. They're not an easy team to prepare for. And, they have Dante and Biddle back, so now they can actually protect the rim a little bit more, which they couldn't do. So it does, we would have got like 6 points in this game 3 or 4 years ago. But I still think Oregon is just in the market is a bit undervalued because of all the injuries they've been dealing with, and now they're finally getting fully healthy. Calabrese, what do you got?
I'm going to go to the Sun Belt, the hatred in the hills rivalry between James Madison and App State. I'm going to go with the Dukes here to get revenge after losing to App State 59-55 in a rock fight 2 weeks ago. We know what App State does. They're going to slow it down and they're going to play great defense. They're great on the defensive glass, but they scare me because they go through prolonged scoring lulls and droughts. They only scored 4 points in the last 9 minutes and 17 seconds of the first half against James Madison in the first meeting. They completely blew their 16-point lead. And James Madison just had a completely off night because when you look at the Dukes this year, they're an efficient offense. They rank 46th in rim and 3-point rate. And I think their top dog offensively is due for a positive shooting regression. Terrence Edwards Jr. is a career 37% 3-point shooter. He's in a 6 for 25 slump from deep. You saw what he's capable of on the road. They opened the season against Michigan State. Between him and Bickerstaff, they went for 45 combined. I think this is a bounce back spot for the Dukes, and I think they get it done here on the road in Boone.
Yeah, you got to make their threes today. Not going to get much at the rim, which they didn't do the first time around, but looking forward to that game. All right, let's move on to our second marquee matchup, and we're going to stay in the Big 12 and talk a little TCU-Baylor. Again, nothing pregame for me here, but I do think just like the first game, this is a great live betting game. TCU is one of my favorite live betting teams because they will just go on runs. They are so good in transition. It's what they do. They just want to get out in the fast break, and they're deadly when they can. So when a team starts missing, right, they're going to get points, and they're very streaky. So this, to me, it just comes down to Baylor, who before conference play, what were they shooting, like 45% from three? So they've seen some regression. They've hit, I think, only like 30% in conference. Is it regression? Is it regression time the other way? Is it not? So like if Baylor's making their shots here, if they're making their threes, then it's trouble for TCU. Because but if they're not, TCU out on the fast break, not only is TCU usually deadly in transition, Baylor's transition defense is horrendous. So if they're not making shots, TCU's going to get easy buckets. They also struggle just to defend at the rim, which is all TCU wants to do. So this is live betting game for me, nothing pregame. I think it's really just going to come down to Baylor shooting from the outside, which they're certainly capable of just going nuclear. Randall, what do you got here?
Stuck, perfect job. You set it up. Biggest edge we have at FTN today, 8% edge on TCU for all the reasons that you said. TCU does things that Baylor struggles with, and the regression monster has hit Baylor big time. TCU does not get blown out. Houston at home win by 1. Cincinnati away overtime lose by 4. Iowa State home lose by 1. Oklahoma State win by 5. They keep games close because they can go on their runs and they're able to play defense and get those baskets. Baylor's shooting has come back. TCU is going to battle. Big matchup here. Big edge at FTN. I'm taking TCU in the points.
Greg, agree or disagree?
I disagree. I'm going to be on Baylor here, but I would be lying if I told you I feel great about it for all the reasons you guys just said. It's difficult to feel confident betting for or against Baylor any given game because it just comes down to, are they pouring in the threes or not? Calabrese has said it twice on the show already today. Positive shooting regression. Now, that sounds weird to say after a game where Baylor came in and made 50% of their shots, 11 for 22 against Texas in the loss on the road. But they had 2 stinkers before this, 5 for 20 against Cincinnati. And then against Kansas State, it was 5 for 28. This team is the best 3-point shooting team in college basketball to me. If they had 2 stinkers in a row, they're due for 2 good ones in a row. And I hear you guys on TCU playing up and down to competition. That's absolutely true. At the same time, I don't think we can sit here and say that they've been able to secure a victory on the road against anybody with a pulse this year. They're 2-5 against top 100 opponents. Give them credit. Some of those games have been close. They almost bit Kansas, but if forced to choose a side here, which I know we could pass, I'm going to put a half a unit here on Baylor. Like I said, don't feel great about it, but now that it's down to 4.5 instead of 5.5, that's enough for me to sprinkle on the Bears.
Calabrese, you want to break the tie?
Yeah, I'm going to go with TCU plus the points here because I just can't unsee Baylor's stinker performances in conference play. 60 points in regulation against Oklahoma State, 62 against Cincy, 54 in regulation against K-State. Eventually, you have to have answers if you're not knocking down shots from the perimeter, and they haven't shown me that yet. We got into all the stats for TCU. They force over 15 turnovers per game. They lead the nation in fast break points, over 21 per game. I think the X factor here, we're talking a lot about positive regression, and it's always on the shooting front. How about the turnover front? Can Avery Anderson III avoid turnovers? Because when he does, this offense is efficient and they'll have enough to at least hang around for 40 minutes. But if he turns it over 6 or 7 times, as he's done a few times in the past month, I think that's going to sink the Horned Frogs. So I'm on TCU here, but he's the player I'm going to be focused in on. I want to see how he reacts to defensive pressure in the first 10 minutes of this game.
All right, good stuff there. We have one final task, and that's our second and final best bet. I have a surprise here, and that is I guess a prize. So my second best bet goes up against Greg. So we're going head to head here. So if anyone beats me head to head for the show for the season, I'll give you $500. You don't have to give anything to me if you win. So you could win just with this. If we don't go head to head again,
wait, can I change my pick? There's $500 being thrown around here.
I will put my picks in last every week, so you can't just try to go head to head with me. It's only if I really like going up against you. So this will be the first one. For what it's worth, I like Ohio State. I will counter to Greg, but first, Randall, what do you got?
Scott Cross covers Troy -8.5 against South Alabama. This is a revenge spot here. Rebounding, offensive rebounding, top 50 in the country for Troy. They're great at turnovers. They're great at shooting three-pointers, especially at home. Troy has a shot, guys, to win the Sun Belt. Why? They played App State once, and they beat them. And they do not play James Madison. This is a great spot for Troy. They beat Texas State at home by 13. And if you look here, this is a team that is 6th best at 12-4-1 against the spread. And at home, they are 8-0-1 against the spread. Scott Cross, completely underrated coach, was let go from UT Arlington years ago, which was a mistake. He has a Troy team that fits the mold, the way he likes to coach. Offensive rebounding, forces turnovers, shoots threes, can disrupt. And they got a revenge spot here against South Alabama, who just beat them. Scott Cross covers. Troy at home laying 8.5.
All right, good stuff. Greg, do you want to make your case for Northwestern and Mr. Boo Booey?
I will do this. And first off, Stuck, if I had known this is the direction we're going head to head, toe to toe, mano y mano today, I would be wearing my Budarius Bowie jersey right now, which is upstairs in the closet. So just know that'll be put on before this game tips. But look, this comes down to the classic Holtman slide for me. That's where this starts. If you go through Chris Holtman's tenure at Ohio State, he's been there, I think, 6 years. 4 of the 6 years, you get to January, he's won like 1 game each season in January. And that's when conference play begins. So you could say this is just a Big Ten issue at large for him, maybe the caliber of his teams. But this team is never playing its best basketball as the calendar turns. That's certainly been true this year. Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale are one of the most talented backcourts in this conference, if not the country. In the Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale era, they've lost 13 consecutive road games in conference play. They won the first game they played as true freshmen. They've lost 13 straight, going back all the way to last season. This year's
where was
team
that game? Where was that game at? Where was that game they won at?
It was in Evanston, Stuck. I know it was. It was. But listen to me, man. If I got to look at Boo Booey and Bruce Thornton right now, give me Boo. I think he's one of the best point guards in the country. 20 points in 3 of his last 4, 7 assists in 3 straight games. And I get that it's a circle the schedule spot and say, well, they just had the emotional win against Illinois. It's a come down. It's a letdown. Last year when Northwestern beat Purdue, the biggest win any team in the country had of the season, they went at home 3 days later, beat Indiana in a game where everybody was predicting them to lose to Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson Davis. I like this team. I trust this team. I don't trust the Buckeyes at all. 2.5 feels short to me. I'll take the Cats.
All right, so I'll make my case for Ohio State. First, you mentioned the spot. Yeah, in the schedule, they just had a big win in overtime. Illinois, they got Purdue on deck. But I think more importantly, they went to overtime against Illinois. They have no depth. I mean, you had 3 guys who played, I think, close to 45 minutes. Now you have a quick turnaround, so I worry a little bit about the legs. But I think too much being made about Northwestern at home because they beat Illinois and Purdue. Both those games went to overtime, could have went either way. They beat Western Michigan by 4 or 5, who I think was without one of their best guards. They lost to Chicago State at home. People forget that. And Ohio State, people talk about their road woes. They won at Northwestern last year. They've been up in the second half. They just can't close. So we'll see if they can close. But I think this is just a good matchup for Ohio State. Their guards should be able to get what they want on the perimeter. They should dominate the glass. And this game will be played completely in the half court. Neither one of these teams is going to push it. So both teams will be comfortable playing in the half court. It'll be very slow paced. But Ohio State should dominate the glass. I think that might end up being the difference. And Northwestern really only does 2 things well on defense. They defend the post and they turn teams over. Well, Ohio State doesn't turn the ball over. So I think it's actually a good schematic matchup and a good spot. So our first head-to-head on the show, Ohio State Northwestern. Calabrese, what do you got?
$500 on the line. I picked the wrong school from Illinois. All right, I'll still walk you through my play here. I like the Fighting Illini. I lay in the big points. I mean, let's start. Under Mike Woodson as a road dog since 2021, Indiana is 5-13 against the closing number. Only 4 power conference teams in the entire country have a worse mark since 2021. Then you got Khalil War, who, at this point, he's going to play. Like, Ware having an ankle injury, I think, is a big issue for the Hoosiers because he has to play out of his mind for them to hang around in this game, which he's capable of doing. But with the ankle injury, that gives me pause. And then when you look at the Hoosiers, how they bottomed out against quality opponents. They've lost by double digits to UConn, Auburn, Nebraska, Purdue, Wisconsin, failing to cover in all 5 of those contests. So they put it on tape. They've shown that they can get run off the floor. And Illinois, now that Shannon Jr. is back in the lineup, they're a top 5 offense in terms of upside, in my opinion. And what's interesting is only 3 power conference programs have more leading scorers this year, according to Evan Maya. Illinois has 7. So you can't focus in on one player. I know that Shannon Jr. and Damask in the backcourt are where they want to focus their energy, but they can spread the ball. This offense is humming. I think they're going to get off the mat. You're going to see a nice bounce back spot from losing against Northwestern. I think this is a get right opportunity for the Fighting Illini. I think they win north of 20 in this game. And really, I think this is kind of white flag time for Mike Woodson. I think this will be his last season in Bloomington.
All right, good stuff, gentlemen, on the first show of the season. Thanks to Mike, and Greg for joining me. Thanks to our producers on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you for tuning in. One final reminder, make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all of our bets there in addition to an abundance of data and content for today's slate and beyond. Also, one final reminder from our sponsor, BetMGM. BBOC is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $158 in bonus bets when you bet $5 for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. We'll be back. Big Bets on Campus, wherever you listen to podcasts, on Monday with the Monday-Tuesday preview. Guys from the 3-Man Week back on Wednesday, and then we'll be back later in the week with the weekend preview. So make sure you check us out there. And we'll be back same time next week, Saturday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, for the weekend college basketball preview. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck with all of your wagers this weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Cheers.